My name is Jack. I am a construction payment expert here at LevelSet. I work on our training and onboarding team, and I work every day directly with our customers, setting up strategies and basically getting them activated in their accounts so that they're able to send preliminary notices and various other documents to protect their lien rights and to manage those lien rights. And if you don't know anything about LevelSet, we are a technology company that allows you to send notices and payment paperwork electronically. You can find and verify property and job details with our services, and you can get alerts when payment problems arise on any jobs that you're working on. We'll talk a little bit more about the software at the end because our main focus today is going to be on the preliminary notice. And so today's agenda, we are going to be going over what exactly a preliminary notice is and how it helps you get paid. Then we're going to talk about how to accurately send a preliminary notice in your state. And then we're also going to focus on ways you can streamline the prelim process. We are going to have question and answer at the end, so please feel free to send in any of your questions through the Q&A form, or you can use the chat to send questions and we'll get to them at the end. And like I said just a few minutes ago, we are going to be sending out a recording of this webinar along with the slide deck. So you'll be able to access any links that I click on in here, and you'll get all of the information in a shareable form. And so jumping right in, you're probably wondering what exactly is a preliminary notice. If you've got any idea of like what a notice to owner is or a pre-lien notice, that would be a preliminary notice. And so it's a document that contractors and suppliers must deliver in many cases to retain the right to file a mechanics lien or bond claim. In a lot of states, there are different requirements depending on who you are, who your customer is, and what kind of project it is. Most prelims are sent at the start of a job and are often required just based on what the state dictates. So be it residential, commercial, state, or federal, these notices are going to be in play. And the purpose of a preliminary notice is a little bit multi-layered because it's sent at the beginning of the project in cases where it's required, but it can often be used as a reminder or even just as a way to create clear communication in cases where you aren't expected to send it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about California in these examples. And so in California, with private construction projects, they are typically expected to be delivered within 20 days of first providing material or labor. And there are certain people who will be expected to receive it, such as a lender or property owner. But on the flip side of that, with public construction projects in California, the GC is not required to send a preliminary notice at all. And so I see that we do have a question already about what state requires, which kind of notice, which is a great question. And I'm going to go ahead and show you right now. We have this page linked right here for all 50 states notice requirements. And so I'm just going to go over here to show you. On LevelSet, we have a map of preliminary notice requirements. And so, for example, you mentioned Connecticut. And so if we go in and click on any of these, you'll see whether or not that we have a requirement. And so if we go back, we've clicked on Massachusetts, you'll see that there are these grayed out options, which are places where preliminary notices are not required on private projects. But if you click on public projects, you'll see if they are required for the different type of project. We have updated requirements for every state, and you're able to come to this page and just click, and you'll be taken to a resource specific to the state you're working in. All right, and so I'm going to head back over to our slide deck. And so going on with the California example, private construction project, with subcontractors is going to have that same 20-day requirement, but there are different recipients who are required to receive it than with a general contractor. So, along with the general contractor, the owner and lender would be present as well. And the same is true of public construction projects, because despite there not being a property owner, there is a public entity involved in those. And so you're probably asking yourself, why do I need to send this if, I might be working in a state such as, I'm going to go back to our map really quick, such as New York. Why would I want to send something like this? The preliminary notice, like I said earlier, is a visibility document. It shares information, creates clear communication, and it lets other people know basically, hey, this is who we are and this is what we're doing on site. This is how to get a hold of us. And so it creates an expectation for your customer and anybody else who might need more information from you to reach out to you, to, address any issues on site, and to also, create a clear message to your customer that you're expecting to get paid. It's important to remember, though, that they are often required. So even if you think you might not have to send one, like in a place like Texas, where the requirements get a little muddled, you will definitely want to go and check and see using a tool like our map, because you want to make sure that you're sending a document like that from the beginning, because if you miss a document like that, it can be fatal to your mechanics lien and bond claim rights, excuse me. For example, to use the California example one more time, if you miss if you just don't send one in California, it can even be grounds for disciplinary action under the contractor state license law. And there are similar laws in other states. In Texas, it is expected to be sent pretty early. And there are other states like Louisiana where you need to send that on the very first day that you are operating on a project. And people who are required to receive these notices rely on these to paint a picture of all the parties that are working on a project. Makes it much easier for them to facilitate payment whenever payment is expected on the job. And it makes payment faster. It really might surprise you that construction companies that send preliminary notices usually get paid significantly faster than the companies that don't send them. And that's because you're prioritizing your invoices when you send notices by making sure they're visible. It's a reminder in a lot of ways, like I said earlier, but it's also just a way to be professional and kind of move yourself up on the list, because you're making strides to have clear communication with everyone up the chain. And of course, getting paid faster means you have better cash flow. And so to sum all that up, sending this one document at the beginning of a job can really, save yourself some headache, some time, some money, because you set an expectation from the beginning that you're expecting to get paid, and you're expecting to get paid in a reasonable amount of time. And so you might be thinking to yourself, what if I miss a deadline? And this is one of the most common questions that we get at LevelSet. Even if, a prelim might be optional, this is still important to send this document out early. But in cases where you do have a deadline in states like Arizona or Texas or Massachusetts, you're probably thinking, can I still file a lien if I don't send it in time? There are some strict rules and deadlines, but typically if there is a requirement for a preliminary notice, then that often will dictate whether or not a mechanics lien could be filed down the line. And so if it's been more than 20 days, in a lot of cases, since you provided labor or materials and you might have forgot to send a preliminary notice, in states like California or Arizona, you might not have the right to file a lien for those amounts at that point. If you don't provide a preliminary notice at all, then you may not have a right to file a lien at all in the state. And so that would mean that you would lose your lien rights. And, the difference between sending one document and losing your lien rights can be easily prevented. And so I mentioned earlier that the role you play on a project often determines what you need to send. And so again, it depends on the state, but with these documents, the short answer is that all contractors, subcontractors, material suppliers, and vendors should consider whether or not they're going to send one and ensure that they send one if there are requirements to be met. Every state has those specific requirements, so it's incredibly important to keep track of the requirements that you might not even realize apply in a very specific situation. And so even if you're an equipment lessor and you're not quite sure what your rights are, you definitely want to check about those preliminary notice rules and requirements, because even if you might not think that you could file a lien, it could turn out that there are options for you from the beginning with a preliminary notice. And so who's required to receive that notice? Typically in cases where they're required, the notice must be sent to the owner, general contractor, and lender, if there is one, for subcontractors. And so in general, with these preliminary notices, the idea is to create, like I said before, clear communication up the payment chain. So you'd want to inform everyone who has a hand in the project. You wouldn't just want your customer to know that you sent the preliminary notice and you know your lien rights. You'd want everyone up and down the chain to know, because this is definitely something that can stand in the way of getting paid. And so for public projects, it's a similar list of contacts that will often receive the document. But many times with public projects, a surety will be the one that is fielding all of these, because they will be the ones dispersing payment at the end. And so we've talked about those contacts, but something that is really important to remember is that you have to go and find these contacts. And this can be one of the most difficult tasks when preparing a prelim, figuring out exactly who needs to receive it, and figuring out where to send that document. And the unfortunate reality is that there are not always easy solutions to this. Some states, finding the property owner may be as simple as searching the county assessor's website. Like in Georgia, you can access the county index and look up the property owner. There are some special keywords that you can keep in mind when you're looking to search for specific information that you're looking for, such as street addresses, owner names, entity names, or the block and lot of a property. These are going to be incredibly helpful when navigating databases, because a lot of these indexes are built around using search terms that you might not think to use. In cases where you might not be able to digitally access a index or the county assessor's website, you can call into an office, and most of the time they'll give you the information that you're looking for. However, for example, Orange and Fresno County in California don't give information like that over the phone, and many counties in New York do not either. And so that often leads to some confusion in trying to figure out where exactly you're going to find that information. Your last option at that point would be to physically go into the county assessor's office, which is the most accurate way to obtain the information. Obviously, that might be a little inconvenient. And right now, with differing regulations, it's not always easy to get into an office like that. So this is the most accurate way to verify a property owner, but we understand that that is something that is not always an option at this point. But because of the difficulties presented with all these options, it's becoming much more common to send out what we call preliminary information requests at the start of a new project. Basically, what that is that companies are sending out an information sheet that's meant to be filled out and sent back with contracts associated with the project. This makes things way easier for finding those contacts, because you don't have to go into these indexes and search with the block and lot of the property. You're able to just get the information back from the contractors and owners above you in the payment chain. Additionally, LevelSet can make the whole process way easier with our Scout Research feature. Depending on the package tier that you have, Scout Research allows a team of LevelSet researchers to find this hard to get information for you, either automatically or upon request. That means that there's not any more digging for the necessary data to fill out your prelims, and which can take hours or days if you're looking for something that is not easy to find. Any way you choose to go about getting this information, though, it's super important that you get it before any deadlines creep up on you, because you want to make sure that you're retaining your lien rights as best you can with the information that you're able to obtain. And so you're probably thinking, oh, I apologize. We are just going to skip over those last two slides. I apologize about that. But you're probably thinking, and are there cases where I need to send multiple preliminary notices? And so a lot of times in construction, people might think they need to send a preliminary notice for every change order, or if, like every time the contract changes, the preliminary notice should be updated. Typically, if the work spans over separate lots, parcels, or tracts of land, one notice to owner is still acceptable as long as they're owned by the same owner and there's only one prime contractor. If there's more than one prime contract, and or owner, then you'll want to send multiple preliminary notices. And even if it's not necessarily required, it's definitely the safest way to proceed. The good way to think about all of this is that with the preliminary notice, you would want to send it out to anyone who needed to receive it. And if there are a lot of different parties involved, you'll want to make sure that the preliminary notice you're sending out is serving the property and the parties involved. So like I said just a few minutes ago, basically if there are a ton of property owners on a project and there's different lots for the project, you might want to send out more than one. Or if there are a bunch of changes, you are able to resend preliminary notices in specific states, but the initial sending of the preliminary notice is what fulfills any requirements. And so you might be asking, what's required on the document beyond those recipients. And so typically with a preliminary notice, you are going to want to have the start and end date of work, even if those are just projections. You're going to want to have an estimate for the dollar amount for getting paid for the work. And you'll also want to have information about your specific company. And so you'll see here on the document itself, there's an About Us section that we include on our version of the prelim that has a description of what we do, the address, as well as a logo, because this all makes it look a little bit more professional. And with our preliminary notices, you'll also see that there is that levelset.com/talk. So in the case that, let's say you sent out a prelim through LevelSet, if somebody is confused about what they received, they're able to reach out to us and we'll be able to explain exactly what this document is. But in general, if you're writing your own preliminary notices or just, working off of a template, this is information that's vital to be included on here because you want everyone above you on the payment chain to know exactly who you are and what you're doing on the project. And so how do you start sending these preliminary notices on your jobs? You're probably convinced that you need to be sending them, but you might also be thinking, this sounds like a lot of work. This is a lot to do. This is where LevelSet comes in. And so we offer lien rights management, like I mentioned earlier. And so we try to make that process as seamless as possible. It's a lot to learn, a lot to keep track of, but that's why we exist. And so we're here to save you time, make it easy so it's not adding a ton of work to your plate. And as soon as you give us project information and dates for your jobs, we'll then calculate and track every deadline based off of the state you're working in. So whether you're in Massachusetts, New York, Virginia, even Alaska, we will be able to tell you what you need to do to protect yourself or what you need to do if you need to pursue payment after protecting yourself with a preliminary notice. And so we have the most up-to-date and statutorily compliant templates that you can get. They're ready to go, and a nationwide network of construction attorneys are working in LevelSet to make sure all of this information is staying as current as possible. And so you'll see here, this is kind of what our document ordering process looks like. And you'll be able to see a preview of the document and add any additional information as you walk through, or even select different templates depending on what your requirements are. We spell out all those requirements for you so that you don't have to do all the hard work of, researching your state, figuring out what role requires which version of a document. We just spell it all out for you based on what you tell us. And so with a couple clicks of a button, you can send out a prelim and our research team will fill in any of the gaps in the information you provided us. And speaking of the research team, they will be, adding job information, property stakeholder details that you need to have accurate preliminary notices. We'll confirm the details you give us, but we're also going to add anything that you might be missing. And then at the end of all this, we mail the documents out and upload all the documentation so you have a living record of everything that we have sent out. And if you ever need further legal assistance, LevelSet offers a product called Legal Guard, where you work with local construction attorneys in your state, and you're able to receive reviews for contracts and other documents that you might be working on. And it's all part of a specific rate for yearly services. If you want to learn any more about LevelSet, you can always go to levelset.com/request-demo. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to start our question and answer portion. And so we've got about 9 minutes left. So please feel free to send in any questions you have. I know that with 50 different states, there are a lot of different requirements that are probably coming up in your head right now. So if you have any specific questions, we can take a look at our map together about individual requirements, or if you have more general questions, we can field those as well. So I see David asked earlier, how often do you recommend we send a preliminary notice? Is once adequate? And so that's something that we covered, earlier. And like I was saying before, depending on how many lots, how many property owners, how many different parties are involved that create, any confusion, if there's tons of buildings on a specific lot that you're working on, then you might want to send more than one preliminary notice. But in most specific cases, there's only an expectation to send one. And so let's see, how do we find the map in LevelSet? And so in the specific like state pages that we have, you can access this map. You'll also get the link to it on the slide deck that I'm going to send out after this. But if you go to levelset.com/preliminary notice, it'll take you to this page here, where it'll walk through every single sort of intricacy of the preliminary notice until we get to the state specific requirements. You can click a link over here, take you down to the map, where if you click on the map shape for the specific state, it'll take you to the requirements for that state. All right, and then Alexa asked, do you have to have a LevelSet account to access the map? No, so the LevelSet map is free to access. All of our resources in terms of guides and articles and blogs on the website are free to access. You're able to just go to LevelSet right here. You can go to Why LevelSet to read up about what our vision is for this specific type of lien rights management, but you can also just go to our resources and we can go to something like the preliminary notices, which will take us to that page we were just looking at. And then Kara asks, do prelims have to be notarized or anything specific like that? Or is that one of the things that varies by state? And so with preliminary notices, depending on the type of preliminary notice it is in each state, you'll see there's like the different types here listed, whether that's a notice to owner, notice of furnishing, notice to contractor. They often will not have to be notarized, but in cases where something is filed, that is often a reason that something will need to be notarized by an attorney. And so if you ever have to order anything through LevelSet, if it has to be notarized, we'll be taking care of that with our document control team, who will notarize any documents that you have ordered to make sure they get filed or sent to the right place. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and grab the map link for us so that I can put it in the chat right now, because I'm sure everybody is itching to go and take a look at the different requirements. All right, and so Jacqueline asked, we have some slow paying customers and have prelim them. And so in instances where you have slow paying customers and you've already sent them a preliminary notice, some different, there are different ways to pursue payment. Oftentimes, in general, the next step would be to file a lien if you feel like you're not going to get paid, but there are tons of different options to pursue payment, like payment demand letters or an invoice reminder, or even a notice of intent to lien that isn't as, as high stakes as filing a lien. All right, and so Helen asked, do prelims expire? There's a delay on the job site and we have to take a break. Does a new one need to be sent out when we resume? So Helen, that is a great question. Generally with preliminary notices, in most states, when you file a preliminary notice or send a preliminary notice, typically they don't have to be filed. That is going to cover the work that you're doing. With delays or situations where you have to leave the job site and come back, that's going to be maybe a more legal question, which another place you can go on LevelSet to search questions like that. If you go to LevelSet community up here, you can take a look at our attorney network and you can see specific questions for your state. So you can come in and search for specific, right here you're seeing Texas. So in situations where you're unsure about what to do when you're working on a Texas project where there's been a bunch of delays, you can always come in here and search questions that have already been asked to our network of attorneys. But typically with that specific question, it depends on the type of project and where it was. LevelSet's guides have some frequently asked questions that cover things like that as well. So like, for example, let's say maybe you did this in Washington State. We scroll down here to the frequently asked questions. We'll talk about who needs to send, what the deadline is, who do I need to send it to, and what if I send it late. And often you'll see, if you keep scrolling on these pages, there are specific questions that have been asked to our network of attorneys. All right, do y'all have any other questions for me? I'm happy I'm going to stick around until 1:30. I know we've got about 2 minutes left, but if y'all have any other questions, please don't hesitate to send them in the chat, or you can also contact our support team if you have any questions regarding anything that we covered today. You can go here to the chat box anytime you're on LevelSet, click that, and it'll initiate a chat with one of our support agents. All right, awesome. If there are no more questions, thank you all so much for your time. If this is something that's made you feel like you are ready to start a process for your preliminary notice, then I feel like my work is done. This is a document that is really important in construction, and even if you're still getting slow paid, it's something that you should be sending, especially if it's required. All right. Well, thank you so much again, and I hope all of you have a great day.